this time together. In a world that cries out, "Fear me," we will listen to Jesus' words, "Don't be afraid." In a world that wants us to hate the other, we will live lives that Jesus calls us to. Love God, love your neighbor as you love yourself. In a world that radicalizes, we too will be radical. Radical with our hospitality, radical with our hope, radical with our love. And so you're invited to come to this place, ready to be who we are called to be. Let us worship our God together this day. Amen. There was once a person who did such amazing things and who did such wonderful things that people couldn't help but follow. And as they followed him, they would ask him questions. And one time, they asked him, "Who are you?" And he answered, "I am the light." Would you join your hearts in prayer with me this morning? The whole law and the prophets depend on these two commandments. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. And love your neighbor as yourself. Lord, let this be. Show us how. Let your love be the lens that lets us see, the search that takes us where we go, the power that enlivens our lives, the light that points to the path, and the very grace that saves us. O God, kindly fill us with your love. Amen. A reading from the first letter of Paul to the church in Thessalonica. You yourselves know, brothers and sisters, that our coming to you was not in vain, but though we had already suffered and been shamefully mistreated at Philippi, as you know, we had courage in our God to declare to you the gospel of God in spite of great opposition. For our appeal does not spring from deceit or impure motives or trickery, but just as we have been approved by God to be entrusted with the message of the gospel, even so we speak, not to please mortals, but to please God who tests our hearts. As you know, and as God is our witness, we never came with words of flattery or with a pretext for greed, nor did we seek praise from mortals, whether from you or from others, though we might have made demands as apostles of Christ. But we were gentle among you, like a nurse tenderly caring for her own children. So deeply do we care for you that we are determined to share with you not only the gospel of God, but also our own selves, because you have become very dear to us. The reflection. Friends, I'm delighted to be able to share with you taped conversation with the Reverend Michael Blair, the new appointed General Secretary of the United Church of Canada. Michael will be taking over that position from Nora Saunders at the beginning of November, and he's here with us today to continue our thinking about the beloved community that Martin Luther King talked about, and to help us think about the racism and what that looks like in the church and in our own lives, in an effort to educate and challenge and illuminate and inspire us to adopt the principles of being an anti-racist church that the United Church of Canada is calling us to be. So here now these words from Michael.
Morning, Carrie. Good to be with you.
To be with you. Yeah, it's terrific. Would you tell us a little bit about who you are and your new role in the church?
So just let me start by saying you can see my background. I'm in a park, and this is something that's really important for me. I try to walk. I live near Hyde Park, and I try to walk in Hyde Park almost every day, and this particular time of the year with the colors. So you're catching me doing something that I really, really love to do. And I've been serving in the General Council office for the last 12 years as in several roles, but started out as the executive minister for ethnic ministries, which was to support the ethnic cultural congregations in the United Church. And then about 8 years ago, with the retirement of Omega Bula, was asked to take on the global ecumenical and justice work as well, and so became the executive minister of what's now called Church and Mission. I'm originally from Jamaica, immigrated here to Canada in 1976. So I'm come from, there are 9 kids in my family.
Wow.
And I'm right in the middle. So I have 4 siblings older and 4 siblings younger. So I'm right in the middle. So that's a little bit about me. Yeah.
Well, thank you. And you're taking on a new role in the church.
Yes. So in a few weeks, it'll be my pleasure, I think, to become the General Secretary starting November 1st. And that's something I look forward to. I think over the years in my time in the General Council office, I've had the opportunity to contribute to the work of the church in some ways. So I feel like this is an opportunity to continue some of the work that I've been engaged in and to support my colleagues in the work that we've been called to do together. And it's uncertain time. It certainly is a time when you kind of wonder what's ahead of us. But there's something about the uncertainty that gives me both energy to explore. You know, it feels sometimes that we're starting with a new slate.
Well, you have agreed to talk with the folks here at Lakefield and Youngs Point United Church about the church's position on anti-racism after everything that's been happening this year, and the call from the Council of Churches to give space in our pulpits to racialized voices. And so that was how this conversation began. And so I'm so thankful that you agreed to be one of those voices who will speak to our context and our community. And so what is it like as a racialized minority person in the United Church of Canada?
It's a mixed bag. I think on one hand, it often feels a fairly kind of lonely place. Often when I'm out and about in the church, there's not a lot of folks who look like me. And so there's this sense of kind of being alone. And there's something about seeing people who look like you or resonating with folks who look like you when you're out and about. And there's also a sense of folks wanting to, I think, try and understand in some ways. it's a gift and a curse in a way. I talk about it in that, you know, you meet person and they want to know where you're from,
Right.
and somehow in that way it does in some ways. I think it's not meant maliciously. It's an interest. There's a curiosity, but it gets experienced as you're different.
Right.
You're not from here, so where are you from? And there's a certain level in which it feels like if you know where I'm from, then you can put me in a box.
Right.
So that's a part of it. And at the other space, there are people who are genuinely trying to understand what it means to have somebody who is a racial minority in the life of the community. So I think it's a kind of a mixed bag.
The General Council recently met virtually online, and I know that one of the proposals before them was on becoming an anti-racist church.
Yeah.
And there are opportunities around us. Sometimes we just have to search for them, ways that we can become more inclusive. So I wondered if you had some ideas or opportunities that you see from your perspective in the General Council and from your perspective as a person of color that would allow us to become more inclusive as small communities.
You know, I'll push back at you a little bit because I'm uncomfortable with the notion of inclusion.
Okay.
And the notion of inclusion says somebody has power to choose who to include. And so that's a challenge. And so if we start to come at it from the perspective of inclusion, then we're immediately beginning to say somebody has the power to include and others to exclude. So I think it'd be important to kind of think about what other language that we may use. And part of it is that in the work around intercultural church, we talk about acknowledging, celebrating differences. So I think in some ways the framework is, you know, anti-racism is important, and the inclusion of people who are racialized into, or the involvement of people who are racialized in our communities is critical. But the posture is a posture which recognizes difference as a reality.
Right.
So for each local community of faith, I would say, how are you, if I were to walk into your sanctuary on a Sunday morning, what are some of the ways in which I would know the kind of the breadth of differences that exist in that community, right? Because even if the community looks alike, the breadth of differences is staggering, and the gift of that difference, right? I mean, it's a bouquet of flowers. The beauty of the bouquet of flowers is not that they're all one color, except if they're roses, right? But it's the diversity of the colors that kind of make you go, wow, right? I mean, look behind me. It's the wow. If this place was all green, there wouldn't be a wow. The wow is it's different. So how is that difference being identified, celebrated? And in some ways, I think part of the gift for us as communities of faith is how do we learn to name difference, celebrate them, make sure that they're acknowledged, and that in every kind of space we are, we recognize that there's difference here. The second thing to say is, and I've been saying this of late, in this particular climate around anti-racism and particularly anti-Black racism, what's been happening is that we're all trying to prove that we're not racist, right? So we're doing all kinds of stuff to say, look at me, I'm not racist. I wonder if we started from the perspective of saying, I am racist. And so, given that reality, how do I then live my life, right? What do I want to do as a racist? How do I want to kind of work through my racism as opposed to not proven that I'm not a racist, right? So if you think about it, that the institution of the church that we're part of is an institution that is part of the colonial project, right? And the colonial project is rooted in a system of racism. So as long as I'm part of the institution of the church, which is part of that colonial project, I'm part of a system that is inherently racist. So what if we started there and then saying, so how do I undo the kind of racism that exists? So some of that has to do with how do I see the other, right?
Mhm.
Which becomes critical. So sometimes our context gets us into trouble.
You and I talked quite extensively about Martin Luther King's notion of the beloved community. And we talked about that kind of being a theme that runs through some of these conversations I'm going to have with people over the next little while. And so I wondered if you could speak a little bit about where you see examples or stories about the beloved community within the United Church of Canada.
Yeah. So I think the notion of the beloved community is communities of welcome, right? That there's a sense in which, in the context of King, folks, no matter what the color of their skin or their economic status, are finding their place. And I think in the context of the United Church, I think we do it well around sexual and gender identity. So I think some principle of the beloved community is, I mean, some of what I've talked about, a recognition of difference, a celebration of difference, and a creating for spaces of difference. I think the other thing about the beloved community is that the beloved community is engaged with its context. And certainly King, throughout his life and ministry, was aware of the kind of areas in the US where he worked out of. And so in many ways, part of the beloved community is a community that's connected to its locality, its sense of place. It knows where it is, it knows who is there. And for me, there's some practical ways in terms of building that beloved community, right? Because it's about so for instance, I suggest to congregations, you need to meet with your MP or MLA, ask them what they know of the community that you find yourself in, because they have a perspective that we don't have. Whatever your municipal leadership is, to have conversation with your municipal leadership, to kind of say what's happening in our community, right? How do we? What are you seeing? What's your hope? What are some of the challenges? How might we, as a community of faith, support what's happening in the community? So the beloved community is connected to its context. It knows its context, and it seeks to be relevant to its context. And that's the other thing I would say, that the beloved community is a invitational community. It invites people in because what it experiences in and of itself is life-given, and it wants to share that life with others. So it's a very invitational, it's Jesus and the woman at the well, right? She goes back to the community and says, come see a man who's told me everything I've ever done. Could this be the Messiah, right? And so you have this notion, as how we have perceived the text over the years, of this woman who has been excluded, experiencing a relationship with this Jesus who affirms her worth and dignity and value. And it so transforms her that she runs out and says, I can't keep this secret, right? So then, so the beloved community is this invitational space. The final thing I would say is that the beloved community is a space of transformation. People in the beloved community know the power of transformational And that, to me, are some of the characteristics of the beloved community.
Thank you. What is your dream of the beloved community? And so it's invitational and it's connected to our context, but is there other things about your dream?
So I guess my dream is that we all taste it.
Mm.
We all taste it, and you know, my prayer, my dream for the United Church is that we become the beloved community of people who know transformation, and people who, because of that transformation, invites others to experience that transformation.
Well, thank you so much for your time this morning. It's
Thanks,
truly
Carrie.
appreciated. Know that as you move into this next stage of your leadership in the church, that you are blessed by God. We don't have to ask for God's blessing. We already know God has promised that blessing to you and to all of us, and that we will be praying that those blessings be revealed to you, along with the challenges and places where your voice needs to be heard and shared within the church and beyond. So, grace and
Thank
peace.
you very much. Blessings.
Would you join your hearts in prayer with me this day? God of the mountaintop, in prayer you walk us to the highest point from which we are offered an opportunity to view the world as you see it, and the world as you would wish it to be. There is so much to be thankful for, and we enjoy opportunities of good health and reasonable living standards, times of relaxation and times of work, of a roof over our heads, and opportunities to feed our bellies, our imaginations, and the aching of our hearts. From your vantage point, O God, we praise you for all that is good for us and allow you to draw our eyes from our concerns to those of our neighbors, our community, our world. In prayer, our eyes are drawn to see those in need of love in our community, here in the church, and in the community of which we are a part. Help us not be afraid of what is different or unknown to us, but instead willing to offer friendship and accept the opportunities to grow in knowledge and experience. Our eyes are drawn to places of power and leadership as we look for those who govern to offer leadership in difficult times. May those who seek to serve as politicians and leaders of communities find themselves shaped by the words, hopes, and ideals of those who place their trust in them. Our eyes are drawn as well, O God, to places of hunger and need. Teach us to share the resources we would covet, and enable us through the activity of your Spirit in prayer and with action to be a part of a creation where all are treated fairly, where all have enough to eat, where life abundant is not just a promise, but a reality. As you, Lord of Vision, draw our eye back to the world of which we are a part, shape our lives by your vision, shown in the faith of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Which art in heaven, in Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the
Go in peace. Go in love. Go in grace from above. Go in light. Let